Radfay 48, Episode 25, March and April 1999. Hello, social media mites and mavens. James Homan here. Well, it's 1 year later, and we'd been told to only expect 3 months. It's been a very memorable year, filled with as many positive aspects as negative. It seemed surreal. I had taken FML, or Family Medical Leave, from Ogilvy One, giving me 4 months or 12 weeks to care for Harold and not have to work full time, 5 days a week. FML included a clause that said my executive assistant position would remain available to me following this leave. That became another in a long list of ironies characterizing this journey. There were, quote, accidents, although nothing drastic. Dr. Seifert recommended that hospice service become involved. Yet another irony, indeed. I had friends to support me, a medical team that I trusted instinctively. I mean, how many people in my situation were so fortunate to have St. Cynthia leading their charge? My days were filled with mundane life necessities, walking Beanie daily, taxes, orienting hospice to the apartment, Harold's meds, getting the laundry done, etc. I found myself waiting. For what, I wasn't sure. A sign, maybe? Harold finally said, quote, "I can't go on," and then closed his eyes on April 30th. And never opened them again. Dear friends, thanks to an exceptionally generous cousin of Harold's, we enjoyed 2 extraordinary opera performances. The Metropolitan Opera production of Carlisle Floyd's Susanna, starring Renee Fleming, Jerry Hadley, and Samuel Ramey, as well as the countertenor David Daniels' recital on Tuesday, April 29th. It was incredible. Thanks to Uncle John, we will be seeing Paul Rudnick's retelling of the book of Genesis, the most fabulous story ever told, on Friday night, and we look forward to the laughs. Tuesday, April 27th, was a rough day. I was sleeping in from our evening before with Debbie, Dennis, and the Ali family, celebrating 3 birthdays at Mesa Grill. Harold awakened me at 7:50 a.m. to remind me of his 8 a.m. medications. After a trip to the bathroom and having taken his meds, he wanted to walk to the living room to read the paper before having breakfast. I assisted him to his usual seat on the usual sofa, and he was reading excerpts from the New York Times to Beanie when I realized that I had not taken Beanie to the park for her morning excursion. As I left to take the dog out, I asked Harold if he wanted me to pick up a coffee from the bodega next door, and he said he'd appreciate that greatly. Just before 9 a.m., Beanie and I left Uncle Harold, dressed in his robe and slippers, sitting comfortably in the far corner of the green-striped sofa, legs up on the ottoman, covered by a small feather bed that I'd had for several years. I assured him we would be back in less than 20 minutes. When I returned home with Beanie, I checked to make sure he was okay. Everything seemed fine. He acknowledged our return, which seemed to interrupt his reverie as he was staring out the window. I fed Beanie her breakfast, placed Harold's cup of coffee on the end table within his reach, and sat down next to him to continue reading the newspaper. Soon I noticed his left leg and foot repeatedly moving left and right, an indication that always meant he had to use the bathroom. I took his right leg from the ottoman and placed it on the floor, removed the ottoman, secured the cane in an upright position within his reach once he was standing, and helped him to the edge of the sofa. Suddenly, Harold wasn't there. His eyes were filled with a vacant look. He seemed to know how to move to the edge of the sofa, but wasn't at all sure what to do next. I wasn't sure he even knew who I was. To secure his balance after he stood, I bent over his right side, holding his right hand with my right hand and my left hand under his armpit to apply support where he had no strength. We'd been encouraged to exert simultaneous efforts in these maneuvers on the count of 3. He didn't want to count, and so I counted. But on 3, he couldn't push off the arm of the sofa as he'd always done. Harold wasn't getting it. Another small action process that seems to us so automatic or rote was now incomprehensible to him. I moved his left hand to the sofa's left arm and explained that he had to help me get him to a standing position by pushing simultaneously off the sofa's arm. He couldn't do it. He kept placing his left hand down between the cushion and the arm of the sofa. I tried another technique, standing in front of him with my feet placed on the outside of his and my knees touching his. I wrapped my arms around his and around his torso as best I could, while I rocked backwards, hoping to get his center of gravity over his legs. Then I tried to lift his more than 250 pounds to a standing position. Nothing worked. He kept collapsing. Just before 10 a.m., I called the hospice case supervisor and requested help immediately. Our visiting nurse was not working that day, so a cover nurse would have to be sent, but that would take a few hours. I called Dr. Seifert, who immediately recognized that Harold must have had seizure activity while I was out walking Beanie, and he told me to administer an additional Decadron and Ativan. An hour later, Harold was still unable to stand or comprehend the actions necessary to stand. Our friend David, who lived across the street, responded to my call for assistance and helped me try to get Harold to stand, but he collapsed on every attempt. Hospice nurse Barbara Anderson arrived about 11 a.m. to examine Harold. Being new to the case, she needed all medical history and quickly asked to speak to his doctor. Dr. Seifert was immediately available by phone and increased the dosage of Topamax to 300 milligrams a day. Barbara also called hospice to request that EMS arrive around 12:30. Harold indicated he needed to go to the bathroom again. The commode chair was brought into the living room. My attempt to get him into a standing position worked this time. From the commode chair, his clothes were changed and he was transferred to the wheelchair. The EMS people were canceled as he relocated to his bed. Nurse Barbara was happy to witness his rebound. She shared many kind instructions and pieces of advice with both me and the attendant. Harold slept most of the day and even through a visit with his mother and sister. I think he may have waited until after my birthday to give in to this more weakened condition. Subsequently, hospice evolved to the next level of care, and today we were assigned Janet Brown as a daytime certified nurse attendant. I explained that we had Anna and Michael as well, so she wouldn't be on her own. Because Harold has slight hearing loss and Janet has a thick Jamaican accent, it is difficult for him to understand her, and it's confusing him. Anna Garcia returns from vacation on Monday, and I'll work with her and hospice staff to coordinate whatever is necessary to retain her and get Michael back for the afternoon shift. They've both established wonderful working relationships with their appreciative patient. I've begun advising friends that next visits would well be with Harold in bed, passing in and out of sleep. As it was explained to us over a year ago, he will eventually simply not awaken. In the past, he's dreamed of Tramp romping in a park next to a beautiful stream, and he's told me that he fully expects to welcome him to their side. I want to think that's where Harold goes when I find his eyes vacant. He's in that park with his best dog. Nurse Barbara had encouraged me to do a visualization in which both he and I would walk into the park and be greeted by Tramp. She suggested this be done regularly as a way to ease Harold's terror, since he's understandably afraid. She also suggested that one day while doing this visualization with him, I may want to assure him that it would be okay for him to stay in the park with Tramp while I went back home to attend to Beanie. His transition could be as simple and as natural as that. Courage, as my former boss and dear friend Wendy Rich has always reminded me in her beautiful French accent. On Wednesday evening, Harold stood in front of the bathroom mirror, about to brush his teeth and do the 3 oral rinses that our dentist had suggested. He stopped abruptly, put his toothbrush down, and said into the mirror, "I can't go on." That statement still reverberates more deeply in me than I can accurately express. I walked him to the bed and sat with my arms around him. He was crying and afraid. I assured him that while none of us could possibly imagine the struggle he's going through, we were all here to help him with it. However, if he decided to stop struggling, that was all right too. We would all remain beside him. Perhaps if you care to visit when he's sleeping, we could hold hands around Harold's bedside and silently wish him our collective and most confident best on his journey to join Tramp in that beautiful park. Always with love, JLH. And that concludes this podcast. Please check in next week for episode 26, a recap of the events of May 1999. We were rounding third at this point. When would we slide into home? Everyone was very unsure of when the finality would hit. As always, thank you for your time and interest. Until next week, then, be good, be kind, be happy, and love one another, remembering to coexist with tolerance while embracing similarities and respecting differences.